Hey guys, it's Jexpler, and today I'm going to be finally teaching you guys about cycles. Sorry for the delay in rendering, but I'm finally getting around to it now. Well, first you're probably wondering, what is cycles? Well, I don't know if you've seen the video where I explain Eevee, but Eevee and cycles are both render engines, and a render engine is just the way Blender renders it. It's just the way it calculates the lighting and stuff. And the major difference is that cycles is a lot more accurate, while Eevee is guessing at a lot of stuff to estimate to speed it up. So Eevee is really fast, but not as doesn't give as accurate lighting and as much as you'd like. While cycles, it is much more realistic, but it takes a lot longer. So I've set up a little scene. I tried to make it the same as I did for my Eevee one, but I could not figure out what material I used for the floor. So I just made it this diamond plating here. So first, what I want to show you is you see we have these materials, and we're set to Eevee right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the render preview right here, and I'm going to switch this to cycles. And if you're not, it's this tab with a little camera. And you can immediately see a big difference. You can see how it looks kind of pixely with the light, with this green neon lighting. This is called noise, and we can fix that. We just have to denoise it, but this is basically what's happening because of the realistic lighting effects. And you can immediately see a lot of differences with, for example, first, this green ball, which I have as an emission shader, is actually giving off light. Next thing is, look at this. This just basically mirror ball I made. It is reflecting every item like a real mirror would. And that's because in cycles, it's actually calculating all the light bounces and stuff. So it's real, true reflection. I also totally forgot to put in an HDR, which I'm going to do right now. There, what a nice HDRI I have. So now you can also see it's again also reflecting the HDRI. And we have a lot of different settings in this tab than we did last time. We have some similar. We have less settings than we did last time. But we also have some new ones. Now, like with Eevee, most of these you don't have to worry about. There are a few where you are going to touch though. First, something I said you guys don't need to worry about when I did the Eevee one is this, sampling. However, we are going to touch this in this video. Again, samples will basically it'll reduce the amount of noise. More samples equals less noise. But we can also just completely eliminate that with denoising. However, if we were to have low samples but still denoise it, it would just look weird and blurry, because denoising works better with less noise. So it'll do its best, but with ton of noise, there's just less detail for it to be able to denoise. So first we're going to go through these tabs, and we'll come back to sampling later. First one is this tab, adaptive sampling. We're just going to go ahead and tick that on. Basically what that does is, rather than applying the same sample count to every part of this, based on the amount of detail in when you render with cycles, it divides basically the entire thing into tiles. And within each tile, depending on how much detail it has, it'll change the amount of sampling. So that if there's an area that doesn't really have much going on, we don't need to apply all those samples that we have for the more complex areas. So that'll just speed up your render time. Denoising we'll come back to when we talk about samples. Now, we don't need to touch this. Don't need to touch this because we're not doing volume, not hair. No, because that's animation. This is really the same as it was last time. The only difference is we have this transparent glass option. Really, all you need to know is if you press transparent, now you have transparency. It's not that complicated. Baking we don't need to talk about. However, that is something that I'll probably deal with in another video. Color management is the same as last time, and performance, all that has to do with sampling. Something I do want to talk about really quickly though, before I go into some of these more render settings, is something really cool you can do with cycles. If I go to this platform, this is a very boring platform. This is because I have disconnected all of our height data. And this basically right now is acting, if I enable this, as a bump map, just like you would if I go here. It'll just switch us to Eevee from preview. See, it's bump. If I set this to 0, that's really it's see because like it's still flat. It's just simulating displacement. However, in cycles we can use these displacement maps as actual height data. So the first thing we do is I'm going to, while over here, I'm going to press N, Options, Settings, change this to Displacement and Bump. Now, we'll have to go back to cycles to actually see this. And just for the sake of this, I'm going to turn on viewport denoising. I'm just gonna, you don't have to worry about what I'm doing right here. I'm just gonna quickly hide everything else. Here, if we look at it from like this angle, you can see that it's still not really doing what we were expecting. That's because it doesn't have enough, it's a single plane. There's not much data. So we're just gonna quickly go, I'm gonna quickly go here, modifier, subdivision surface, simple, turn it up a few. And then I'll just apply all these transformations, turn this down, and then if we just wait for it to finish rendering in our viewport, it's harder to tell from this angle, but if you look especially like along the edges, we actually have displacement. Oh, here's the perfect way to see it from the side. So that's just kind of a random kind of thing you can do. It's kind of random, just kind of interesting. Let's turn this up to 6 and this down to like 3. Okay, I'm gonna unhide everything. So let's talk about samples. Yay! Samples aren't really too complicated. Well, the actual like math behind it is, but as far as you are concerned, do not worry about it. 128, usually pretty good. If you have a pretty complicated scene, you might want to turn it up. Just that really though depends on how well like your results are coming. If 128, if you're rendering at 128 and it does not look good, maybe try turning these up. So normally I would try maybe ×4 to 512. That's really the other sample cut I'll use occasionally. We're just going to switch this on. There are a bunch of different ones here. I should leave it to default because I don't know enough about the other types of denoising. However, this is simple denoising basically. This isn't as good as the other denoising which you can do, which I will show you in a few minutes here. Before, I just want to show you rendering first. We are going to actually enable an add-on, which we can, and we don't have to download anything. It's already in Blender. We just have to turn it on. If we just go to up here to edit, then to preferences, then to add-ons, if you're not already selected here, and then just search tile, T-I-L-E. I already have it on. Tile, you want to turn on auto tile size. And then when you do, in this tab, if you go below performance, you can just press auto tile size. Now, the tiles is the size of those tiles I was talking about earlier, how big each tile that it gets divided into that it will render. So it'll render one tile at a time. Threads, you want to leave this at auto detect. That has to do with how many tiles it can start rendering at once, and that is tied to what kind of computer you have, what kind of CPU, and that's something I'm definitely not going to get into, computer components and stuff. The last thing I'm going to say before we actually render this is right here, device. It's set to CPU, but it can also be changed to GPU compute. Basically, this is, do you want to render this with your CPU or your GPU? CPU is your computer, GPU is your graphics card. If you do not know which one you should be rendering with, leave it at CPU. That is totally fine. Only changes the GPU if you know that you have a GPU that is more powerful than your CPU. If what I'm saying right now means nothing to you, don't worry about it. But if you do want to switch over to your GPU, first of all, I would advise before switching it, go back to viewport shading, or not viewport, go back to material preview. sometimes when you do a GPU, it has to do something called compiling render kernels. I'm not going to go into that either, but basically it has to do kind of a weird pre-rendering thing. Normally I don't preview it. I usually preview with the CPU and then I render with my GPU. But if you want to render with your GPU, you're going to go to Edit, Preferences, System, Cycles Render Devices. Now, there's of course none, but then there's also CUDA, OptiX, and OpenCL. Just figure out which one. If you know which one your CPU was already, just click on that one, and then select your GPU. Or you can just kind of click through these. See, there's only this one has something for me, and then just select it, and then you're good, and then you can render with your GPU. But then if you switch it, you're going to want to press Auto Tile Size again, because GPUs and CPUs have drastically different optimal tile sizes. Now we're going to go ahead and render this, but first, of course, I need to add a camera, because I totally forgot about that. And then just going to go to Render, up here, Render Image, or you could just press F12. See, it says loading render kernels may take a few minutes the first time. That's really the one downside about rendering with the GPU, is that it has to do this. However, reading up on it, apparently how fast it loads your render kernels is based on how powerful your CPU is, which means if I have a really good graphics card, but my CPU is kind of meh, so this just takes a little extra longer. But I'm going to cut until it starts rendering this, because right now we see nothing. So as you can see, now it's rendering. Actually, this is the second time I'm doing this. I had set it to specifically my software to record Blender, but not this, because this is a separate, it comes up as another window. So now that I have already rendered this once, it skipped the render kernel step, because it only has to do, if you don't change anything, it doesn't have to do that again. But as you can see, it's going tile by tile. These tiles are much bigger than you would see if you were doing CPU, but with the CPU, you get a bunch of tiles, or a bunch of tiles at once. For me, it's 6 because I have a 6-core CPU, but the GPU, it just does one at a time. But again, much bigger tiles. I ended up turning off that displacement thing I had for the floor. I just set, now it's just bump again. It was just really, really slowing down my render. But as you can see, it is also denoising as it goes along. Right here it says denoise 10 tiles. You can see it's denoised this, but it hasn't denoised this. So you can see the separation of noise and then no noise after it's been denoised. So that really, really helps. I can see it like here too, and it does really well. Got the denoising stuff. We have some noise. Oh look, now that noise is gone. So it's almost done here. While it's doing this, I'm just going to say something you might, two specific settings I can think of that you probably missed from Eevee are bloom and ambient occlusion. Screen space reflections is not a thing, because that was just simulating what this is doing with this lighting and the reflections. However, ambient occlusion and bloom is something you probably want, and those are not settings we see, but lucky for you, we can do it. Now, if you have gone to this tab, this tab, there's an ambient occlusion option. That is not the same thing. I don't know why, it just isn't. But we still can use ambient occlusion. Lucky for you. It's quite simple, actually. We are not going to do it for the emission one. However, we are going to do it for this. Basically, you can get an ambient occlusion node by doing, if you didn't notice, Shift-A, search. I searched ambient occlusion. Now we have it. So if I quickly, I have a shortcut to do this. This ambient occlusion will work with these now. So let's see, ambient occlusion. See, now we have ambient occlusion. So I'm going to mix these together. No ambient occlusion, ambient occlusion. Let's do it for this one. Ambient occlusion. You can see we got some ambient occlusion there. RGB. There to there. Multiply 1. And as you can see, Now it's hard to see because of the noise, but we do have ambient occlusion. The next thing you probably want is bloom for this shiny ball. Well, for that, we're gonna go up to the compositing tab up here. Yay, it's blank. We're gonna select use nodes. And now, because we probably don't have node wrangler enabled, we're gonna add a viewer node. Then we're gonna go to layout, reroute, put this into here, and we can put this into here, and here. Then go to view, fit, shift A, search, glare, drop that here. I'm actually gonna move, no, we're good. Okay, so we have streaks, which is this, which is kind of, you're seeing it now. Then we have ghosts. Ghost is kind of weird. We have simple star, which is kind of like that too, but rotated, and then fog glow. Fog glow is the one that's a bit like what you're used to. Now we have a couple of options. We have this is the quality. We have size, so you want it little and you want it big. And then also threshold. So higher threshold, less things get bloom. Low threshold, more things get bloom. Let's stick it there. See. So let's set this to high. Give this to 7. No, that's not enough. 8. Yeah, let's go for the full 9. And if you ever said, "Hey, this is not enough glare," just drop and add another one, and then give it a second to composite. See, now it's bigger. So let's just go back and do this. Boom. Let's go back to 8. Now we'll go back to 9. Let's ignore the compositing step. And then we're just going to re-render this. Oh, it's still set to CPU. Well, I forgot to change that. It does not matter. We'll just let it render with the CPU. So you can see small tiles, but more. And rather than just cutting, I'm going to just do this like as a little time lapse, speed up a video until it's done. So I'll see you guys, or I'll talk to you guys when that's done. Alright, so now it's done rendering. It's just compositing right now. Just calculating that, and there we go. So this is not like this is my platform with my 3 spheres. It's not really the best example of showing off the capabilities of cycles. However, it does, in my opinion, it's better. It is more realistic. So like my final conclusions, I'd say are, if you want cycles, is more realistic, but it takes longer. Eevee is not as realistic, but it is very, very fast. So it really just depends on what your priorities are. Usually for me, I have time, so I'll just let this, if I have a complicated scene, I'll just let it sit, let it render, and I'll go off and do something else. Cycles has a lot more like really cool little features that I'm not going to cover in this video, just because, well, they're a little more specific, and I'll probably cover them maybe in their own separate video, maybe like in a little short, kind of like short tip video. But that's it for this episode, or video, whatever. Thank you guys for watching. Please like this video and please subscribe. Subscribing, it's free, and it really, really helps my channel. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.